you have to talk about inclusion first.
Okay.
And then diversity. Because if you're not an inclusive environment, it doesn't matter how many brown and black faces you'll get, it doesn't matter how many LGBT people, it doesn't matter how many working class people you have, they will eventually feel alienated and leave.
Hello, Uncle Nihal.
Hello, Ria.
And welcome to Unapologetic.
Love that.
Thank you very much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I think with this podcast, what I'm trying to do is let people be their most authentic selves on screen. And that's like,
Yeah.
I know you're like the epitome of this.
Gets me in trouble, Ria.
Yeah, I know, but that's what makes people want to listen, because they want to hear what other people can't say. I feel like that's what you can do.
Yeah.
So I want to know how your brain works. So I've got a list of questions that I'm really interested to ask you about. And it really is a pleasure. But when I was thinking about us recording, there was something in your book, and it was actually at the end in your conclusion, which is, let's talk how to have better conversations. And it says, nerves coupled with a desire to impress can make you feel as though you must fill the space with an impressive observation or a groundbreaking suggestion. And I was like, oh my God, I need to calm down before we're having this conversation, because I'm the type to want to try and fill silence. So I'm going to learn in this podcast to relax. I would like you to tell me and the audience a little bit about who you are.
So my name is Nihal Arthanayake. I am a middle-aged Essex boy, lived in London for 20 years, huge music fan, specifically hip-hop. I got into music, being in the music industry, working in PR in the music industry, being a journalist, became a Radio 1 DJ, did that for over a decade, worked at the BBC Asian Network, did that for over 5 years, then moved to BBC 5 Live to do a daily speech show on a big mainstream radio station. I am a father, I am a husband, I am a son, I am a brother, I'm a Tottenham Hotspur fan. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, you know, and they're in many ways, aren't they, really? They're the superficial things. They're the labels that you can just add on to yourself, right? And then you're riddled with insecurities and ego and all of these other things that go into making you a human being.
Yeah, okay, that was a great answer, because I was very particular about the way I wanted to ask you, because I was like, do I ask what do you do, or do I ask who you are?
Yeah.
And I'm glad I'm like, that was a really amazing answer. So I appreciated that.
Appreciate the question.
So the first main area that I'm really excited to talk to you about is diversity and inclusion. Because I know you're a massive advocate of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. I myself am as well. But I wanted to unpack it a bit further, because I think it's like a really big, I don't know whether I'm assuming here, but I just feel like it's quite a big buzzword these days. And there's a lot of lips work and not a lot of actually doing much.
I think you just answered my question.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, right. You just answered it. Yeah. I mean, look, I think that you have to talk about inclusion first.
Okay.
And then diversity. Because if you're not an inclusive environment, it doesn't matter how many brown and black faces you'll get, it doesn't matter how many LGBT people, it doesn't matter how many working class people you have, they will eventually feel alienated and leave.
Yeah.
So it should be inclusion and diversity. The inclusion has to come first. And also, inclusion is something much deeper than we think it is. We think it's because we put on a Diwali event at work that we're inclusive.
Yeah.
Right? And it's kind of nonsense. What inclusion really is saying to someone, invite me into your world so I can understand who you are.
Right.
Right? And if I can understand who you are and what your goals and what your ambitions and what your values are, then hopefully we can work together to make you feel included in this place. It isn't just doing Black History Month.
Yeah.
Right? That's not what it is. But these corporate entities think that kind of is what it is, or that they've put someone of colour in a managerial position. And, you know, that's good. Yeah, but look, there's one of you on the board. It's like, really? But that one on the board, does he or she feel like they always have to wear a mask every time they're around you?
Yeah.
They have to code switch
Yeah.
in order to feel included. And that's not inclusion. I mean, look, I think the whole inclusion, diversity thing is bollocks. And I think that it's just been used as a way of making liberals feel good about themselves, right? And that's hugely cynical. But the challenge is, and it's a challenge of leadership, and it's a lack of leadership that you don't make people feel included. You know, I work in an organisation which has an incredibly poor record or incredibly good record, depending on how you feel. I've spoken to a lot of people of colour. And look, the plural of anecdote is not data. So I'll just be clear, it's not data.
Yeah.
But I've spoken to a lot of people who are desperately unhappy. They walk in, they don't feel like they can be their authentic selves.
Yeah, I agree.
And everyone else is walking around being their authentic self.
Yeah, because they can. It's
Because they can.
normalised. Yeah.
Because they're the majority. So they don't ever have to think about how it feels for us.
Yeah.
They don't ever have to. And then as soon as we do say something about it, oh, you've got a chip on your shoulder. Oh, you're angry.
Yeah.
Oh, why do you keep going on about this stuff?
Yeah.
It's like, because it matters to us. Because you don't have to think about it. Look, I'm not gay. I'm not Muslim. But I do think about what it must be like to be a young gay woman in an overwhelmingly straight white male environment, right?
Yeah,
Like, how must that feel? Now, of course, there's a young gay woman who's going to go, I work in an environment like that, and I'm absolutely fine. Well, that's great for you. Well done. Happy days,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it's an inclusive environment. The fact that you've managed to navigate your way through it is fantastic. Or change yourself, or be chameleon-like. And I've had to be a chameleon almost my entire career.
Yeah.
And at this stage in my life, I'm kind of done with it. I'm kind of like,
Yeah, you don't want to do it
this is
anymore.
who I am. And this, Gloria Steinem, the feminist writer, said something brilliant, which I love.
Okay.
She said, the truth will set you free, but before that, it will piss you off. Right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right?
I know this line.
Right?
Yeah.
So it will
yeah.
set you free, but I'm
Yeah.
about to piss you off.
Yeah.
Right? Now, with the truth that I'm telling, you can either choose freedom and we can forge a path for a better leadership team, a better organisation, better values, better connection with customers, or you can just get pissed off
Yeah. Which is
and push back
what happens
because
a
you're
lot.
fragile.
Yeah.
And if you're fragile, you shouldn't be a leader. Right? If you can't inspire people from whatever background they come from, you shouldn't be a leader. And sadly, there are people in those positions who aren't very good leaders. And they're not really interested in real connection. They're not really interested in it.
No.
What they're interested in is meeting a target, which, by the way, they mostly fail.
Yeah, I
Right?
agree. Yeah.
Right?
Well, it was interesting because when we're talking about what leadership means and in the concept of it being in a capitalist structure, the whole point is the target. There has never been a concept of it needing to be an inclusive environment because that wasn't the point. The point was never the people. The point was always the profit. So when we're trying to now embed inclusive structures into a structure that has been built with the target of profit, how would you even implement it? Like, can you even implement inclusion into these structures?
So if you see inclusion as an add-on, then you're going to have problems.
Okay.
But if you see inclusion as part of your profitability, that actually you'll be a successful business. It's been proven, right? It's just been proven in certain industries. The more diverse you are, the more creative. It's just a business critical option. What it isn't is a chance for someone to go, hey everyone, here's Sanjay. Sanjay, tell us all about Hinduism.
Yeah.
Isn't that great? That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
What it should be about is, and this is, look, for years, as someone of my age, I had to put up with diversity being framed as charity, which was like, look how good we are being to you people.
Oh
Look.
my God.
And that's what it felt like all the time.
Oh
Diversity
my God.
drives happened all the time. Like there was this like 5-year cycle where people would come out and go, oh God, isn't it terrible? We've been so horrible to them. Let's put some of them in jobs.
Yeah.
And then you got this feeling that once you'd got a job, they'd all kind of go,
Oh, amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Say thank you.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Be grateful, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, screw you. I earned this. I'm better than you, right?
Yeah.
Like the reason I'm here is because I've had to work harder than you
Yeah.
to get here. The fact that you think that you've handed me, I mean, Lenny Henry said it brilliantly. He said, we're sick and tired of eating at the kids' table.
Yeah.
We want to eat at the grown-ups' table.
Yeah.
And that was the hardest thing people to get their hands around. And really good, strong organisations, in my experience of coming into contact with them, is that they just get it. That they just get, well, that's part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's just part of it. To have people that are from different backgrounds that will be able to test your own orthodoxies, which will be able to say, well, actually, no, from this perspective, it's like that, or bring in an element of their culture saying, well, you know, my family growing up, they did this.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, okay, well, that might be a little bit interesting way. And also as well, you know, look, if you're targeting global markets, you've got to try and understand
Yeah,
a little bit about those
exactly.
people. And
Yeah.
what is it better than having someone there that goes, oh, well, just want to say, put your hand up at the table and say, well, when I was growing up, this happened. And that can, Ria, I used to be on the board of the British Council, right, which was the
Okay.
world's biggest public. I was in my 30s. Like everyone, I mean, it was chaired by Lord Kinnock, the former leader of the Labour Party. This person was a lord. This person was a captain. It was mad. And I was in my 30s. I was a Radio 1 DJ, right? And after a couple of years, I turned to the MD of the British Council and I said, or the CEO of the British Council, and I said, do you know what? I'm not making any difference here. Like, I don't get it. I look at these board papers and I'm like, you know, I just don't get it. And he said, listen, and I spoke to a few people at the board about this. He said, you'll ask a question from your perspective that will completely turn the conversation in a different direction. And you have to understand the value of that. And that was the first time I ever really felt valued, that actually...
I was head turning.
Yeah, or coming from a different background is a superpower in organisations where there's groupthink.
Yeah.
Right? If you come in and just go, no, that doesn't feel right, or just put your hand up and go, yeah, but what if we did it like this? And everyone goes, okay.
Yeah.
It's so easy, whether it's a left-wing echo chamber or right-wing echo chamber, middle class, working class. It's so easy to become comfortable in your own ideas, and you shouldn't be. You know, I've started listening a lot to the Joe Rogan podcast because I wouldn't naturally gravitate towards Joe Rogan, right? I would usually think that's not really my guy.
Yeah.
But as I've listened to him more, I thought, oh, actually, that's quite an interesting point. That isn't, but that's quite challenging.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be, and I'm not there yet, but I want to be in a situation whereby my own mind is challenged, that I don't think that I'm right.
All the time.
All the time, right? Like there's certain things maybe I think I'm right about, but I need to become uncomfortable in my opinions.
Yeah.
A scientist once said to me, I am acutely aware of the vastness of my ignorance. Right?
Okay.
And that is a really good place for human beings to be.
Yeah.
You have to be acutely aware of the vastness of your ignorance.
Yeah.
Because our ignorance far outnumbers
what we know.
What we
think we know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's just common sense that it does, because there's so much information in the world.
Yeah.
There's so much to know. Anyway.
There's too much to know. And that's actually, when I was reading your book, there were so many different elements and so many different things that I hadn't thought about before.
Well, that's good.
And and I am a know-it-all, and I have been. So I was like,
you're right to be
humbled.
Yeah.
I was like, actually, no, I want to think about things differently.
Yeah.
And it's also trusting and respecting what you're reading as well, because you have to be very skeptical when you read certain texts, and you have to be careful about where they're coming from and stuff like that.
What agendas are underpinning them.
Yeah, and what's going on and their point of view in the world. And I think there's been a really big push on what colonization is and what it has done to our current environment. And it was interesting how you talk about this concept of polarization, because we're split in between two sections. And it was like you said something how the leftists are all called, they're into like identity politics, and the right wingers are all racists. And I was like, yeah, that was quite interesting, like post 2016 with Brexit and Donald Trump. It really did polarize it. On top of social media algorithms reaffirming our point of view as consistently correct, we are seeing that there is this huge divide. But what I was thinking and what I wanted to probe you on actually was, when we're having conversations and you're talking to people in person and you then were able to open up as a human being rather than just what their point of view is, and people are getting quite freaked out about how people are pushing a certain agenda now and you can't say anything in this environment anymore. I think from my point of view, being maybe someone younger and that's really into like social activism and wanting to make the society better, is it because people in our generation are finally finding a voice and we're finally reasserting that certain things you just cannot say these days? Like in our post-colonial environment, we are finally finding a voice where there isn't room for a conversation about whether racism exists. There shouldn't be anyway. So is the polarization because people on the left are finally finding a voice?
I think they've always had a voice. They've just got now more ways of amplifying that voice.
Yeah.
But the argument actually is that you're losing your voice, and you're losing your voice through a self-imposition, a censorship of what you can and can't say.
Right.
So you're not really gaining a voice. What you're doing is that you're stripping away other people's right to have a voice who you don't agree with.
Okay.
Right? So
Yeah.
that's the accusation that comes from the right, right? It says
Yeah,
that actually
that's what they say.
you're shutting down debate. And interestingly, I spoke to Shami Chakrabarti, Baroness Chakrabarti, in fact, and she's been a human rights lawyer her whole life. And she says, look, you should have the right to tell me that as a woman and as a woman of colour, I am not the intellectual equal of you. You should have the right to say that to me. You should have the right to offend me.
Okay.
Right? So what the accusation is levelled at your generation is that you're saying you shouldn't have the right to say that. No one should have the right to tell Ria, a young woman of colour, that I am superior to you because you are a woman of colour. No one should have the right to say that, right?
Yeah, that's what we would think.
Yeah, right? But yeah, they should have the right to say it, but you should have the right to dismantle that argument.
Okay.
Completely. And then the majority of sensible people who would never think that you were inferior to someone because of your colour and your gender will go, well, that person who's just told you that is an idiot, right?
You think, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But equally, what you should have a right to do, and where this gets really important, I think, is to ask that person who thinks that you are inferior to them because of your gender and your colour, why do they think that? Where did that come from? Who was it that persuaded you that that was correct?
Okay.
What is the peer-reviewed research that would say that? Who are your intellectual idols that you have copied these views from? What is it in your own childhood, in your own upbringing, in your own environment that has led you to believe these things? Not to tell you're wrong, not to say you, but to try and understand. To just ask. Now, you, and I'm seeing it in your body language, if someone said that to you, the last thing you will probably do is go, oh, why do you think that about me?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But as is pointed out in the book with Dia Khan, who went to, she's a Muslim woman from Norway. She went and spent a year or so with neo-Nazis in America.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, at the end of that documentary, White Right Meeting the Enemy, one or two of them stopped being neo-Nazis because they'd never spoke to a Muslim woman of colour before, right? They'd never had a conversation. And more importantly, a Muslim woman of colour had never said, well, who are you? The first question you asked me.
Yeah.
You know, how did you become this? And when you drill down into what a lot of those American neo-Nazis shared, there was poverty, there was trauma, there was criminality, there was addiction, there was abuse, there was a lot of things. There was white people who'd seen their entire communities destroyed by globalization, right? So the car manufacturing plants that had fed their families for generations were no longer there. And what they saw, what jumped into that vacuum, was other far-right racists saying the reason that happened is because black people and Hispanics took your jobs. And actually, when you realised, or when they were made to see that black and Hispanic people were living in the same conditions of poverty and trauma and neglect, they actually thought, actually, I have more in common with them than I have with perhaps rich fascists who are trying to manipulate me and exploit me.
Yeah.
So when you say a voice louder, I'm not sure it is. I think the voice has become louder to tell other people to shut up.
Yeah.
Right? And if you look, what Dia Khan said was she could stand there and hold a placard up saying no more Nazis, right?
Yeah.
She'd go and feel super good about herself for doing that.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't have less Nazis,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
and
that's
ultimately,
true.
what does she want in the world?
Yeah.
What do we all want? We all want less Nazis in the world.
Yeah.
So she went to speak to them. There's an unbelievable guy called Daryl Davis, who's a black blues singer who befriended Ku Klux Klan members in America. He went to their houses. He went to Klan meetings. They were telling him, if you turn up, you're going to die. He, I think, converted tens of these guys, tens of them. Said, I just never had a drink with a black man before. Because he got to know them and they got to know him. He invited them into his world and eventually they invited him into their worlds. And they just went, actually, this is a colossal waste of energy, me hating black people.
Yeah.
That black man, actually, he's my brother.
Yeah.
He loves his kids, I love my kids. He wants the best for America, I want the best for America. He goes out and works to put food on the table, I go out and work to put the table. The only difference we have, actually, is melanin. That was the only...
That was it.
That was it.
That was it.
But it was all this other stuff that you had to get through. So my provocation to your generation would be, you know, you have to feel uncomfortable with what people say, but it's the power of your arguments
that make a difference.
That kind of make a difference. And also, go into a conversation is so difficult. To go into a conversation with a bigot is so difficult, right? I've done it, right? It is difficult. But to go into it genuinely thinking that, okay, this isn't all of what you are, right? So my 80% friend isn't my 20% enemy.
Okay.
So the things that we don't agree on shouldn't be led to define who they are. So if you voted Brexit and you voted Brexit because you didn't want more immigrants in this country, that's not all of who you are.
That's just a tiny part.
There's just an aspect of your belief system which can change, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's turning my point of view because I think I'm probably, definitely, I was in sixth form when it was 2016.
Wow.
And that was when my political views were being shaped quite rapidly and quite intensely. Twitter was like my little weapon that I was using.
And it was carnage on Twitter, right?
It was carnage. Yeah. The amount of debates I used to get into. No, they weren't debates. They weren't debates.
They were
I know the line.
Of monologues.
Yes, that was what I had written down. It literally is like a monologue. And you're trying to air your point of view so intensely to the point where you're just trying to be right. You don't even care at that point what you're fighting for.
Tell me why. Here's a challenge for you, right?
Go on.
Tell me why President Trump is the greatest US president in the history of America. Tell me why.
I would say it's his ability to rally people together, to believe in a philosophy or an identity, to believe in the place where they stand. I think that is why.
So you would naturally never say President Trump is the greatest president in the history of...
No.
Right, you would never.
No.
But I asked you a question, and it's a provocation, obviously, because I
Yeah.
knew you would never usually say something like that.
No.
And you did find a way
To understand.
to understand.
Yeah.
So here's another example, right?
Go on.
The comedian Sir Billy Connolly, right? One of the greatest living comedians, without a doubt, right? So he grew up in an incredibly abusive household. His dad was physically abusive to him. And he did therapy where you empty chair it. So you sit there as the abused and you imagine that your abuser is sitting in that chair. Now, his
Right.
father had died by this stage, right?
Okay.
So he then asks his father why he did what he did to him. He then has to go and sit in that chair and answer as his father to imagine what led to his father doing the things that he did. Now imagine how difficult but powerful that is. And it's not to justify what he did, but it is to try and understand something of who he was and how he came to be the person he was. And Sir Billy Connolly told me in this interview, it was like I'd been carrying around this sack of rocks my entire life and I just let them go.
Really?
Yeah, it's powerful.
To understand.
To try and that's the important word, right? Not to justify, but to understand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's not enough of that in the current political
No,
debate.
we justify a lot, I would say.
Or we jump on people who try... Look, in my book, I interview Professor Tanya Byron, who works with child molesters, right? She works with the people who are regarded to be the scummiest, most scumbaggery of scum in our society, right?
Yeah.
Grown men, because it's mostly men, who are sexually attracted to children.
Yeah.
Right? And she gets a load of stick for it, right? She gets loads of stick for it. But she's not trying to justify the behaviour. She loathes the behaviours, right? But they're unlikely to spend the rest of their lives in prison, right?
Yeah.
Because whole life tariffs are very rare,
Yeah.
right? So they are going to come out. So someone has to go and try and rehabilitate them.
Yeah.
Right? Someone
yeah,
has
I
to
know,
do
I
it,
agree. Yeah,
right?
totally. Yeah.
Right? But there'll be large sections of the media that will go, you're trying to justify it. You
Yeah.
just went and back out on the streets. You should, and it's so easy for some idiot journalists to go, you should lock them up and throw away the key.
Yeah, it's clickbait, isn't it?
But all right, costs whatever, 40, 50 grand a year to do that
Yeah, exactly.
for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Right? Really going to do that? Cost £1 million for 20 years
Yeah.
to keep them in prison? Are you really going to do that? So there are people at the front line of trying to ask questions, trying to understand so as to rehabilitate people,
Yeah.
whether that be neo-Nazis or whether that be child molesters. And it's brave, right? But you have to talk to them. And, I think it's interesting because, you can't talk about your generation as one big group of people because there aren't, because there's
No,
right
we're so
wing, left
different.
wing. So of course
Yeah,
it is, just like in
yeah.
my generation there are. But I think it's really interesting and challenging to think that you should allow people who as long as they don't wish violence upon you or incite hatred, like incite violence
Yeah.
against you, to say what they've got to say and challenge it.
But what about when news shows present two opposing sides of an argument and all they're doing is to try and light a fire between them? So there's no conversation happening between them. It is consistently
Piers Morgan type stuff.
like we're trapped in a cycle of debate, and it really infuriates me because I never see a conversation or an understanding from either side ever. And that is hard for me to watch, like in the morning when I wake up.
But he's just not very bright, and he doesn't make you feel that you've had the sum of your knowledge added to by him. You just feel like he's just winding you up because he needs to monetize.
Well, that's what
your
it
eyeballs.
feels like a lot of the time.
And you're being exploited by these people. I mean, I
Yeah.
just watched a 9-minute interview between Piers Morgan and a professor from Iran who was very much taking the side of the Iranian state, and Piers Morgan was, challenging this guy. I listened to it for 9 minutes to see what it'd be like. I learnt nothing from it.
It's terrible.
I learnt nothing from it.
Yeah.
I just Piers Morgan would do his bit, and then this other guy would say very provocative things about Israel, and then he'd challenge him, and it was like, I got nothing out of it.
Yeah.
Whereas I did speak to a former US diplomat at the State Department and got an incredibly nuanced. Don't go to these dickheads. Go to the academics.
Yeah.
The people who've spent their life understanding it. The people that are nuanced. They see both sides. And you can spot straight away, like, this dude is obviously going to go, Iran was this, Iran was that, Iran did this, Iran did that. They were brilliant. It was amazing. And then Piers Morgan will go, no, it's not. I mean, Piers Morgan he kept calling the UK a regime, this Iranian guy, right? The UK and US regime. And it's like, it's not a regime. It's a democratically elected government. The British government does not go around killing women for not covering their hair.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
how dare, like, I would have said to him, like, how dare you call the UK a regime?
Yeah,
I mean, that's insane. It makes no sense. It's not factually correct. It's a look, maybe no democracies are perfect, but are you mad?
No, yeah, there's like no comparison.
Yeah, it's no comparison with Iran. And so all of this stuff was happening, and I thought, what am I getting, light or noise? Right? From
That's
this.
a good way of looking at it.
Right?
Yeah.
And I want light. 10 times out of 10 I want light. Because otherwise I'm not...
You feel relief when there's light in the room.
Of course.
You just like, if you're talking to someone that's giving you an insightful opinion,
you
feel relief.
Yes.
But when you're watching clickbait news shows, it doesn't. But that's, I don't know whether it's the majority, but sometimes it feels like that.
It isn't. And the rise of podcasting shows that people now want longer, deeper conversations. They're sick to death of the kind of model of getting these two people who just start shouting. I mean, I saw George Galloway being interviewed by Richard Madeley on GB, Good Morning Britain or whatever, and Richard Madeley brought up George Galloway being nice about Saddam Hussein, which is like 25 years ago. It was like, is that new? Like,
is it necessary?
It's just, is it news? And Richard Madeley was trying to argue how it's just providing context of who you are. But it's like, really? I mean, I didn't get anything from it.
No.
You're not added to it. But you have succeeded in having a tear up on radio, on television. You've had an argument. Brilliant. Well done.
But that's it. That's
I can
just
do
an
that
argument.
in a pub
it's
car
not even a
park.
debate. It's an argument.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. But then that is, you're right, because it's the rise of podcasts. Because I was thinking about it further, and I thought, after, sort of having a think and analysing things on my own, and like even like the concept of having my phone around me and what that does to me, and all these types of things, I was like, well, to be honest, I think the rise of podcasts is a real testament to how people really just want to have a conversation without having anything around them. It's literally, we're forced to have, well, we're not forced, but we've chosen to have this conversation here right now. And I don't feel anything else around me, but I feel really involved in what we're chatting about in this moment.
So do I.
And it's not for anything else, or to make profit out of it, or to monetize it. It's like, I don't know, I just think we're so interested in argument and being right, that you're right about it just wanting to be about having a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, all my favourite people I've ever spoke to have been considered, calm, nuanced.
Yeah.
And I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people.
Yeah.
From Asian Network to 5 Live, 12 hours a week, 40 odd weeks a year for 8 years, right? Like,
Crazy.
It's so many people.
Yeah.
And always my favourite people is when you're in the presence of true greatness. Elise Doucette, for instance, or Jeremy Bowen of the BBC, the lead Middle East and international correspondents who would just give you this overview of what is going on.
Yeah.
Right? But even podcasts like, The Rest Is Politics or The News Agents are such good ways of trying to understand, and The Rest of Politics US, trying to understand the world in a different way. It's important. And Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
interestingly.
Yeah. So another area that I wanted to really get into was the concept of social media and our phones and us living in a narcissistic environment consistently.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get your point of view before I ask any specific questions.
There's so much to say here. I mean, what it has done to the kind of rewiring of our brains. I mean, that's Professor Jonathan Haidt wrote a book about this recently, about generation anxiety, or the anxiety generation, which is you, really.
Yeah, I feel it.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of like constantly. And what have filters done, especially to young girls, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that you can make your nose smaller and more pixie-like, or your lips fuller, or your skin softer, and then you switch that filter off and you've gone back to looking at you again. And you've seen this kind of quote-unquote perfect version of yourself. And you do it all the time. And then you start to just kind of do your head, tilt it a little bit to the side when you take a photo, because you think that looks better. And you put one knee kind of up and then crossing over the other knee. And then you swivel your body slightly to the side in every picture, because you're no longer pleased with who you are and what you look like. And then you'll go to Turkey and get your teeth done and get a nose done and get your lips filled, because you're no longer happy. I mean, it's bizarre.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, and it has much more of an effect on young girls than it does on young boys, right? I'm not anti-phones per se, but I am very conscious of the fact that we should ration our time on them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you shouldn't have them all in. Look, how many times will you see it, and I'll see it when I'm walking past a table full of people of your generation? You're not even talking to each other.
I know.
You're staring at your screens.
Yeah. But it annoys me. Like, I can't handle it anymore. It was just really weird because a few days ago, I said, oh, I hate my phone. I just want a BlackBerry again. Like, that's all I wanted.
People are doing that.
Because I can't handle that I have to reply straight away. And then there's this whole push about, to be successful, you've got to be on it 24/7. You've got to reply straight away. So I like have this weird battle in my head where, oh my God, if I have to be successful, I've got to reply straight away. But then the other side is, I'm stuck with this for life. Like, I have to also control when and when I don't reply to, because people of your generation, they didn't have the speed of reply. No. So you're into it now, whereas we now have to live with it for the rest of our lives.
Well, you've never not known it.
Yeah, you just have to. It's like, oh, I just want a BlackBerry. And then my phone broke. Literally,
amazing.
Like a few hours after I said that, my screen just stopped working, and I didn't have my phone for a whole day because I sent it off to the store to fix. I've never felt so much relief in my entire life that I had no choice but not to reply to anybody.
Yeah.
I didn't have a concept of time much.
Yeah.
And I had to actually listen to my body when it wanted to wake up and when it wanted to go to sleep, because I wasn't bound by time either.
Well, people should have no right to access you 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
In France, I think under certain circumstances, companies can be taken to court if they email you after a certain time.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually put into legislation in France.
Oh my God.
About emails after a certain time. Yeah, you should not be contacted, because they're trying to prevent it. And now, actually, Professor Haidt said this, that the UK is kind of leading the charge in having phones banned from schools.
I think that's a really good idea.
I mean, I went to see a comedian called Tommy Tiernan recently in Manchester, and when you turned up, you had to put your phone in a pouch.
I love that.
Which was locked, and then you couldn't be opened until the end. And it was amazing, because I'm addicted to mine, right, without question.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to wean myself away from just constantly going, needing a doper hit. Someone sent me a WhatsApp, or checking my Instagram to see if someone's like, how many more followers have I got today?
Yeah.
And it Tucker Carlson, who's like a right-wing journalist, presenter, formerly of Fox News, now doing his own thing, he has no email.
No way.
Doesn't use email.
No email?
Nothing. Doesn't use the internet. Like, he's got no interest.
No subscriptions, nothing.
He's not interested in the internet. He's just not interested.
How do you survive without?
He does text messaging on his
Oh my
phone,
God.
but he doesn't do any emails. Mate, amazing.
But how do you live
I don't know.
without an email?
But you just work it out. People can just send you a message if they've got something that urgent.
That's crazy.
Think
to me.
about how much. I would say 90% of my emails, I would say, are bollocks. I don't need any of them.
Yeah.
I don't need to know that this record's been released. It won't make that much difference to my life. I don't need to
unsubscribe.
know that Mr. Porter has got 104 new drops for me to look at.
Yeah. Don't
care.
care.
Right?
Literally
Like I
don't
could
care.
genuinely, and I should. I mean, I'm saying that, but I should just unsubscribe from all of them.
Yeah. I do. I unsubscribe from everything, but then they still pop up anyway, whether I like it or
Oh
not.
well, that's bad.
Yeah.
That's bad.
It's
I mean,
not good.
okay, so you were at dinner with some friends, Ria, right?
Yeah.
And everyone puts their phones on the table. Do you feel comfortable to go, guys, can we just put our phones away?
I tell my friends all the time.
And?
Well, I have a best friend, and I always say, can we just put our phones like away, and
Out of sight.
like out of sight, because I know if I'm in front of any of my friends and their phone is next to them, I can feel that if it pings, I'm out of conversation, and I actually feel embarrassed because I might be in a really vulnerable moment. But if that phone pings, they're going to think about their phone and who is texting them, rather than me being really vulnerable right now, thinking about, my life or whatever I'm talking about. So I actually get embarrassed if the phone is there and I think it might ping, so you don't go deep.
How do they react to you saying that?
One of my friends knows that I always say it.
Right.
So she's like, yeah. And then we might put it away. And then
But does she do it because you're asking her to do it, or does she get it and she agrees with you?
I've never gone into detail. I've just
You should.
asked. I think I might go into detail.
You should, because she'll kind of resent you for it, right? Like there'll be a kind of FOMO, resentment. Oh, why is she being like this? Rather than going,
I understand.
yeah. Or even better, going, actually, you're right. We're going to have a better connection here
Yeah.
if we don't have this.
But I don't think people feel that or know that or understand that.
What? I mean, that's kind of mad, right?
That's in general. That's
Yeah.
how it
Well,
is
the
with
way
everyone.
okay, so the way you would test that, presumably, is to go, okay, you're not addicted to your phone. No, I'm not. Okay, leave it for a day. Just don't have it. Lock it in
Yeah.
a drawer.
Yeah.
Lock it in a drawer. There are these things that you can get, aren't there? These like timed cases.
Can you?
Yeah, where you just put it in, you just set a timer on it, and it won't open. It just won't open.
That's amazing. Because I always think I'm going to need it for an emergency, but there's never an emergency.
What? Obama's going to call you?
I know.
Like,
That's what I think.
Right?
He is not calling me.
Yeah, right.
Anytime
Right.
soon.
And also as well, your mum, like, ask your mum and dad, right, who I love, they ask them, when they were growing up, there was huge swathes of time where your grandparents didn't know where they were.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Now we've got to find my iPhone.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Now it's like North Korea. Like your parents know where you are every single minute of the day.
They know from like Tesco.
They can track you.
They know everything.
And also, there are probably not more predatory paedophiles than there were in the 70s.
Yeah.
Or the 80s.
Yeah.
But now we think that they're everywhere, right?
Yeah.
That Ria, our darling daughter, is going to go out this house and there's going to be some monster waiting in a white van to kidnap her, right?
Yeah.
And the likelihood of
van.
that is more likelihood probably of you being hit by a comet than there is of that happening. So going back to Professor Hyatt's book is really interesting. He said, now what we've done to our kids' childhoods is we're overprotective in the real world and underprotective in the virtual world.
Totally agree.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's no regulations or restrictions. I was watching something on the news the other day, and they were talking about how these big social media companies need to put in more regulations for children. I mean, this is an ongoing topic anyway, but you'd think it was more protected than it actually was. I mean, the things that you can find online in 1 second are ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I get worried because my brother's only 14.
Yeah.
And I've warned him about what you can find online. And, you know, he's aware of everything and stuff. And it's just a conversation you have to have. But then I can't ever stop him or his friends or anyone else because it's at a click of a button. There's no parental controls whatsoever on anything.
No. Well, weirdly enough, there are more parental controls on Android phones than there are on Apple phones.
Okay.
So on Android, you do Google Family. And so my wife knows to the minute how long my daughter has spent on every one of her apps. I foolishly bought my son an iPhone.
Oh, no way.
So she can't control that the same way as him. But I have to say with him, he took Instagram off his phone.
Yeah.
Because he was like, this is getting in the way of stuff.
Yeah.
I think, because there was some really horrible stuff happening in WhatsApp groups, he came off that as well.
Yeah.
So now he's just, I mean, it's actually now, he doesn't take his phone to school with him.
Does he not?
No.
That's fab.
And he hands it to us because he's like, I won't revise if I have this.
So he knows.
He knows exactly what it's doing and he's aware enough to go. And whereas, and to a certain extent, my daughter can go without a phone for a week and not really care.
That's amazing.
But then, if you give it to her, you can't get it off her.
Yeah.
And she gets really aggy if you do then take it from her.
Yeah.
So it's such a weird thing. But we were really super tight with them. No, actually, that's not true. My wife was super tight. I was like, it's fine.
Whatever.
Yeah, and she was like super on it. She's been unbelievable, my wife, on this. She's been brilliant. And she's been proved right.
That is perfect to actually do because I try and take my brother's phone off him, and whenever I do, he's like, "Oh, I'll just put it down." I said, "No, I really just want to put it in a drawer so you don't feel like it's anywhere near you."
Yeah.
And I get met with a lot of hostility. I can't lie, but I still do it every day because I know it's
He'll
just
thank
going
you
to
for
be
it.
better. I hope so.
Yeah, he will. Well, thank you for it. Just to wean you away from it.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And then when my phone was taken off me for a day, I've now I feel the addiction less, so I can just put it in a drawer and I'm not bothered by it because I know nothing crazy is going to happen. But what I wanted to get into was the concept of narcissism and our phones, because when I read that, I was like, oh gosh, yeah, that is a huge topic and I never thought about it. So for people that actually haven't read your book, what is the concept of us being so narcissistic, like because of our phones? Like, what is that about and what is it?
So your phones mean that you are constantly set to broadcast, not receive. So you're constantly broadcasting this post, that message, that it's always about you broadcasting out. But actually, if you're not set to receive, all you're doing is just, it's like playing tennis with someone that will only serve at you.
Okay.
They're not interested in the return.
Yeah.
They'll just keep serving. And that's what social media is. You're just serving all the time. And you're not really interested in any meaningful, you'll see a like and you'll be like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
A little bit of dopamine.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
But you're not engaging in any conversation with you. And also with the filters, as we were talking about before, Ria, it's all about curating this perfect life. And I know some people aren't doing that now. Some people are going the other way and saying, look at, I guess, attractive people going, look at all these spots I've got, right?
Yeah.
And doing that. And fair play to them for doing that.
Yeah.
But by and large, the narcissism comes from the fact that you're constantly projecting, right? You're not saying receive. Now, humility is about being set to receive, right? Like, I want to hear your questions. I want to know more about you. I want to understand you.
Yeah.
But the social media equivalent of this interview is me just telling you stuff. And even though you ask me a question about narcissism, I don't care, right?
Yeah.
I'll just keep talking about what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Now, if you met people like that, and I'm sure you have met people like that, and I know for a fact your dad has met people like that, right? Yeah. That they're unpleasant.
Very.
To be around.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no good personality trait around narcissism.
No, it's vile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know the antidote to it?
What?
Read more fiction.
Really?
Yes. So some researchers did research around testing for empathy.
Okay.
Right? And reading fiction is an empathy gym. It is like taking your empathy and building muscle to it. Because when you read a book, especially fiction,
Yeah.
you have to inhabit another person's lived experience. You have to. And also, you can't read a book and scroll at the same time.
No, you physically
have to be
cannot.
in it.
You have to be in.
You have to be in. So they did this research and they did this test for autism, which is where you show people's eyes, and from that you should be able to tell what emotion they were going through just by looking at this part of their face.
Right, okay.
And they found that people that read more fiction were much better at telling what the emotion was this person was going through than people who didn't.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
quite,
weird.
It's quite
I didn't
magical.
think you were going to say that.
Yeah,
I really didn't.
I know.
I was like, wonder.
It's quite magical.
Yeah, I didn't think it was reading fiction.
Yeah. So the antidote to narcissism, read books. So empathy in sign language is this.
What, this?
You go like this, right? Like
Yeah.
you're locking, and then you pull it around and go like that, right?
Oh,
Right? That's empathy. So I'm going from me to understanding you. In German, it's even better.
that's so sweet.
Yeah. Oh, but in German, it's this. You go like this. So you put your hand like this, and you go like that, which basically means I'm inhabiting your being. I am going to become.
Oh, so you're
part
literally
of you.
in.
I am going to become part of your existence. I'm really going to try and understand. That's what empathy is in sign language in German.
That's amazing.
Yeah, someone taught me
It's
that.
like you actually are going to be part of them.
Yeah, I have to try and inhabit your lived experience
Yeah.
to understand it.
But I think
Right?
that goes with everything, doesn't it? That's life. You have to be empathetic. And you don't have to feel
You
what
say
they've-
that, but
I
a lot of
know.
people aren't.
They're not.
You know.
They're just sometimes slightly sympathetic, but
Yes.
that sometimes then it transcends into a bit of pity, really.
Well, we're going back to the conversation about inclusion.
Yeah, well, it all loops around in the end, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Because if you don't understand, I was thinking about this. If you don't understand right, let me phrase this correctly. If you have not walked in the shoes of another, you will not feel and understand the way their lived experience is. However, you can draw some comparisons and try your best to feel how they might feel.
Yeah.
I'm not a black woman living in the US. However, I can draw some similarities of being a brown woman living in the UK and how that might feel.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I'm trying to get at here, but I don't understand how people can say just because I haven't felt it doesn't mean I can't empathize with it.
Yeah, I thought that would be such a strange argument, wouldn't it, to put to someone? So I think it's valid, perhaps, to say, well, you have no idea what it feels like. Right?
Yeah.
That's a valid thing to say to someone. I think a black woman from Arkansas saying that to Boris Johnson makes sense. You know? I get that you can say that. And then the thing is that I'm not trying to say that I understand it. What I'm trying to say is that I believe your lived experience.
Okay.
Right?
That's a good way of putting it.
I'm not challenging it
Yeah.
because that's your lived experience.
Yeah.
You know. Because you're very empathetic. Where does that come from?
It's a nature nurture thing, I guess. With my parents, well, they're quite empathetic, so I naturally am.
Yeah.
And just by a lot of reading, to be honest.
Fiction,
but also a lot of academic articles when I was, and then just seeing, I think maybe some anthropological texts as well, because it's
What was your degree in again, Maria?
Sociology,
Right,
and then I did my master's in post-colonial studies.
Okay, wow.
So I could feel the anger and the hurt in all these academic texts of people saying we need a better life. And that is where it really came through, because then that fire stays inside. It doesn't go.
Do you believe that we should drastically cut the amount of immigrants coming to this country?
No.
Why not?
Right, so I've got a weird opinion about this, but it's basically, when we're talking about immigration and we're looking at why we have immigrants coming into the UK, why we have immigrants coming into the US, I think what's interesting is that pre-colonization, people were in their own sort of boats. There was a little bit of overlap, but because technically we didn't have any technology to get us from A to B quickly, we were sort of in our own areas. During colonization, we had a lot of the West wanting to come into the East in really, really simple terms, and they were constantly coming in, taking our manpower, taking our resources, throwing it back into the West and developing our societies as we see today. So the way we have developed in the West, and specifically in the US and the UK, is a testament to how much they've exploited the East, which is the global South. And interestingly, because we're now in technically, I don't believe we're in a post-colonial state. I think colonization continues to exist and thrive in its new way. But technically, let's say for argument's sake, we're in a post-colonial state. You now have all these people in the global South, I'm generalizing here, all these people in the global South seeking better lives within the global North, which is the West. So they're naturally wanting to migrate in because that's where the life has been kind of taken to and from. That's my opinion. Obviously, I believe in it, and I do believe that has some truth to it. And that's why you've got a lot of immigration and a lot of people wanting a better life. And it connects to the concept of the American dream, where if you work hard, you can achieve what you want. But if you work hard in the US and the UK, you can achieve miles more. So we're pushing that out into the world. We're sending all these fairy tales out to all these people, literally globally. You're going to get an influx of people, whether you like it or not now. So when people complain about immigration, I just think, well, look at your past. Like, what have you done to now stop it? You've created the portal, is what I would say.
So do you believe in open borders?
Not answering the question, but I believe in decolonization. So what would decolonization mean? Would it mean open borders? Would it mean fluidity between countries? In a utopic like society and like world, yes, we would have freedom of movement and mobility. In reality, open borders probably would cause havoc because we also have to look at population density, whether we can actually house a number of people.
Right.
We have to look at it practically. I mean...
So going back to my first question to you, then that would mean we would have to slash the amount of immigrants coming to this country, because if you just believe in the 745,000, which is a very disputed number because it includes students, but if you were to believe in that, there is no question that we could afford to add 7 million people to this, 10% of the population to this country in 10 years. We just couldn't do it. We can't build enough houses for the people who are here, right? And it's fine if you're living here, right? And that's the interesting thing, is that quite often I think people like us who are kind of middle class and we live all right lives, you're not going to be impacted by it, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to be impacted by 300,000 people coming from Sudan because Sudan is a wreck. What is going to happen is lots of white working class places or working class places are going to be, and they are already the places which have the worst resources, right? They're probably the worst schooling, worst healthcare. I mean, look, someone born in Kensington is probably going to live 25 years longer than someone who lives in Blackpool, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to happen. Then those meagre resources are then going to be used by people who have come here recently, thus creating resentment and frustration and anger in those communities. So it's quite an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you've got a rise of fascism, right? Because there are these quote unquote invaders coming in, taking our resources, and that narrative will just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. So again, going back to the first question, after hearing that, do you believe we should slash the amount of immigrants coming to this country?
I'd still say no, because it's to do with the allocation of resources, if that's the case.
Yeah, and we haven't, right? Is it not better that rather than having the professional classes from those countries coming here and driving taxis. They may have been professors where they were, right?
Yeah.
Well, other than having them here and being a brain drain to their country, and their country of origin will just get worse and worse and worse, you actually find out more effective ways of using your foreign aid budgets to try and bring stability to those countries so they don't have to come here, so that they don't have to, because what you don't want is sub-Saharan Africa to be emptied of all of its greatest talent.
That would not happen though, would it?
Well, I mean, the argument could be that what you're arguing for is exactly that, because they're the only people that can afford to spend $5,000 to $10,000 perhaps to pay traffickers to get them into this country.
Yeah.
Right? So.
But then if that's the case, you've not got a lot of people being able to afford to come anyway.
Well, I mentioned one country, but I could have said Libya, Sudan, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. People come from India to come here, right?
Yeah.
And the list goes on and on. I'm not even talking about South America.
Yeah.
Right? I barely left Africa before you. It only takes say 100,000 people from each one of those countries, and you're into the millions in not long, right? So the mass migration of people is also driven by climate change, right? As well as war, poor governance, poor
but then
political
that all
situations.
stems from how it was back in the day.
Yeah.
So when you're in the period of colonization and what they've done to all these countries all around the world, this is now the consequence. So now they're trying to have a band-aid approach of stopping borders, but you're kind of into a much bigger. The problem is huge now because you've got a very huge imbalance of resources globally. So you've got to actually go back to the beginning. And what you mentioned about having people going in and looking at foreign aid, I don't like the term because it gives me the vibe of charity, and we don't want to now give charity back into a country that we exploited. Yeah. So it confuses my mind, but it's about having a global distribution of resources accurately. That will solve the problem. I know that's really high end thing to say. Yeah. But the problem with the issue of immigration is almost like a symptom of our past environment. So I can't sit here and say, well, I don't want all these people in when it's a massive, massive issue, because you might be able to control it slightly. I don't believe what the UK government are doing to control it is super duper ethical. I don't particularly agree with it. But I can understand from their point of view maybe why they might feel like they need to, but you have to look at the bigger picture. It's wild to me that it's just focused on this one point of view.
Yeah.